Three. All right, all right. We are live. Welcome back to In the Future. And today, Max, hello. We're going to talk and dive into a topic that's both intriguing, could be unsettling depending on how you feel about it. Also, controversial point of view. The topic is global depopulation crisis. I know people talk about migrate immigrants and people moving from one place to the other, that there's a lot of people moving around, that our population is exploding on the planet. In some regards, that's true, but in a lot of developed nations and on the earth as a whole, we're actually finding that we're starting to flatten out. And in a lot of countries, we're seeing population shrink, especially in developed nations, like I said. To think about nations like Japan, Western Europe, so Italy is going through this. And when you think about it, if you haven't really thought about how economic models really thrive on, like they really thrive on endless consumption in some ways. And if you have fewer people, you start to see less demand. That means corporations start to fidget their fingers about, oh, how do we get people to pay? That means people start to potentially lose their jobs. And we're actually seeing that with China, where they just hit, I think, their peak population growth in, I think it was 2022, and they're starting to shrink. So they're because of the whole one child policy thing. So you're starting to see China's economy start to shrink in some ways, right? It's not. You're seeing it actually. You start to see a country like India, who does have a population explosion, start to catch up. But maybe similar to a lot of topics we've spoken about, maybe automation comes in. Robots come in and help fill that gap. But Max, what are your thoughts? What is your POV? I don't know if you've thought about this at all. But wanted to get your take on what you think.
Is there concrete evidence that you're citing when you say that it is declining? And are you more confident in the U.S. population declining or the global population?
I would say global population. To your point, so global population as a whole flattening out, right? I think I can cite there is. I don't have the reports in front of me, but we're expected to hit, like I think the biggest growth of human population should start to flatten out in 2080. And on the opposite, though, just to say there are places around the earth that do have population growth, like Africa, strong, very very strong population boom, and Asia as well, right? Still going semi strong. Outside of Japan, outside of Korea, outside of China, we're talking Southeast Asia, and typically less developed countries. You're seeing those baby booms. But when you talk about the U.S. is actually kind of on the cusp. We aren't necessarily shrinking like we're seeing in Western Europe and Japan and Russia, right? Russia's super big time losing population. And the reason why, uh, controversial here, but we're starting to see that the war in Ukraine is partly part of that resource and population gain that they want to gain. But in America, we're on the cusp where we can go either way. We're seeing Latin America has a little bit of a boom. But America's population growth has flattened out way more than it ever has in the past. Apart from immigration that's not being counted. We don't really know the actual numbers of those.
For some reason, I feel like there's no consensus on this fact, right? I don't know either side, but it doesn't seem
Yeah.
like there's a clear takeaway that everyone agrees. Okay, the global population is shrinking, more specifically, like, where is the U.S. in that? Because if I look up, just like census.gov, right,
Mm-hmm.
like for the U.S. The headline is, this is on November 9th, 2023, U.S. population projected to begin declining in second half of century. So the U.S. population is projected to reach a high of nearly 370 million in 2080 before edging downward to 366 million, so down by 4 mil, in 2100.
So we start to see, so it kind of ties to the 2080 being the year where we start to see a curve. I did say global at that point, but we are seeing that there's an expected number where we start to curve the population, meaning it's already in people's minds though that the U.S. population will decline, right?
Okay. So instead of instead of us debating whether it's true that it is declining or not in the U.S. or not, I'm curious because that's for other people to kind of make their own mind, right? I'm curious what you think is contributing to this. So like China,
Yeah,
okay, the one child
for
policy
sure.
for sure, and I think that's something that sociologists saw even when that was happening. Um, you and I asked the question, but before you answer it, something else you said before that I thought was interesting. So you said there might be some concern from corporations worrying that they'll kind of lose their consumer base, right? It, I think that in the future, right, and you also mentioned AI. So if we think through that real quick, so if AI starts being adopted by corporations at a higher rate as it's expected to, the output from those corporations will continue to will really rise, right? Like maybe even people will start to have to work less. That's the four
Yep.
day work week that we spoke about on another episode. Okay, that all sounds logical. Um, okay, so they work less. Maybe there's a universal basic income because there's a surplus of cash that's being spit out by these corporations. Okay, that makes sense. Like the Amazons of the world.
And
Um,
Without AI and automation, the output would have dropped as well
sure. Why?
because you don't have as many people pushing the buttons, people working
Mm,
the stores. There's the productivity of these companies without AI and automation, and this happening, that would have been a real collapse. But automation and AI could maybe float these corporations by with less people now.
and why do okay? So going back to the original question, why do you think that there is such a decline? Let's say globally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think, and primarily we're seeing it in developed countries, right? Developed countries meaning a lot of North America, Western Europe, Japan, China, Korea, and I think it's primarily because of the trend of people choosing to marry and have children later in life, right? I think that's one, and as many kids, right, per family. Think about it before the industrialized society that we lived in right now. Having a kid was like an asset, right? Like you would have people had a lot of kids. Like my grandpa lived on a farm and they had 13 kids, and a lot of the times, and I think that people really saw having kids as like, oh, that's an extra pair of hands. Either they're gonna cook or they're gonna work on the farm.
Hmm.
As we developed into the society, where it's actually kids don't are no longer an asset. They're more of a
Liability.
liability, right? Because now we're living in an urban environment. We have to put them through school. We have to nurture them. We have to teach them all the social constructs, and it's
Great
expensive.
point.
So
Yeah.
people are like in developed nations, they're like, well, I don't want that now. I want to save money and be able to navigate through this life. So that's number one from the developed world, right? That's why we're seeing that drop. Um, and and for women, access to career opportunities, choosing higher education, they delay their time before they started wanting to start a family. Is also, I mean, that's part of the delay as well, right? Which is great in that sense, right? Getting more educated, um, or and delaying, just having kids so they can advance their careers. I think the increase in mortality rates, people are living longer in regions, and this could be life like people live longer, they want to delay it, and that's causing people to have kids less, right? And I think that's why we're seeing explosions in certain countries in Africa, certain countries in Southeast Asia, where it is still an asset to have kids. Same in like some parts of Latin America, it's still an asset to have children because children could be like they're almost like a bet to get you out of poverty. You'll do better than I will, or you're going to be an extra pair of hands. But I think that's really in the U.S. and Western Europe. I think it's the first factor that I mentioned. That's the first. What do you think?
I agree with the first. I'll also add two to it. Um, so yes, people are marrying later. I think that those are two things, right? People are choosing to marry
Yep.
later, but also they're choosing to have kids later. Those are two different things, right? I also think what's really helping is this spans multiple generations, but women leaving the home to actually, to go to work, right, and be
Yep.
a real part of that, which started a while ago, but it's still, obviously continuing. And it's no longer, you're the mom, so you're going to stay home and raise the child. It's like, paternity laws or regulations are coming in to play, which are allowing, people to kind of both work throughout those prime career ages.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting one. I also think that people are just choosing to have less sex and choosing to do it until they're older, right?
Totally. Totally.
There are
Big
several
problem in
reasons.
Japan, by the way. Big problem in Japan.
Absolutely. Um, you're going to get me to my second point. What's the problem in Japan that's contributing into it?
So I don't know the origin of it, but the problem is that people are dating less. There's like people don't have romantic partner. It's like very normalized not to have a romantic partner ever in Japan now. It's almost like they commoditized physical or romantic relationships. It's all been to some level, right? All gamified. I don't know if gamified is the word, but like it's become a commodity. And I'm not talking about like adult industry. I'm talking about like just even talking to people. I'll go, for example, they have these cafes where you talk to either like I think it's like not like it's like a hostess. There's nothing about it that's sexual or even yeah, nothing about it is sexual. They just sit with you and they talk to you because people have such a hard time making genuine friends. That's one thing I say America has. Like I saw something on the map recently. It was like a research. It's like Americans are like one of the high level countries where people still have friends and socialize and make like lifelong friends, even as adults. Some parts of Europe don't, and in a lot of parts of Asia, like especially Japan, they do not.
Is that continuing to change as well, partly because people lost a lot of their social skills during the pandemic when they were
Totally,
just, cut off
totally.
from society.
It's easier.
But also just looking down at your phone all the time, right? And like the more apps that suck the time out of your day, the less time you have to actually talk to people and meet people. To your point about going to bars less, right? Like this is
Yeah.
where you those serendipitous moments where you meet people
Right. Right.
are declining.
100%, and it just becomes more comfortable to just be. I mean, think about it, man. Like, if we appeared in this world from 100 years ago, we have like when you talk about basic needs, we've got. I've mentioned this, I think, on a previous. All the entertainment we need, any type of entertainment. We've got all the food that can come to our door. We can talk to AIs very soon that could be our best friends, right? They love they're personalized to us. Oh, Spencer, you're the best at video games. What do you want to talk about? Like as soon as we hit that cusp, it's like why go out the door and risk getting infections? Go out the door and risk getting injured and getting into fights and getting in harm's way and conflicting with other people. Why wouldn't I just stay at home in the comfort of my world, my personalized world? Screens give me everything I need, everything I want, and I don't need to meet anybody. I've got every need covered. That's where I think we're headed to, and I think that will definitely, boom, plummet the population growth for sure.
Fascinating. So you did ultimately bring me to my third point, which is for why I think there's declining birth rates, and that's just lower fertility rates, right? Which
Yeah,
is a
as well.
result
Yeah.
of stress, right? Because you mentioned now, why would I want to go outside? It's why would I want to go outside and deal with uncontrolled stress?
Yes.
Where my screen and the comfort of my home, it's a controlled environment, right? It's safe. My mortality is in my control, right?
Yeah.
Who can hurt me here? And I do agree, and just like people, games becoming, it's no longer you had to have a console at home that you plug into and you play. Now it's you turn on Netflix, there's games available. Okay,
Yeah.
that's going to take more of your time at a younger age, where okay, maybe you're not good, it's too early for these shows and you're too old for the baby cartoons. So what are you gonna do? Maybe you'll play a little bit more games on your TV now. You
Yeah.
have it on your phone. You can do it. You're gonna go to the park. You're gonna sit on a bench and you're gonna play video games on your phone if you want to.
Right. Right.
And so I think all of those things. you
I've
know,
seen that actually.
it brings me to like what was that movie? Oh, it was called Her,
Her, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Remember? Yeah, and like that type of person. Ugh.
Yeah, right. It's so to us, but it's like if you were to tell that to an alien, they would probably be like, "Oh, that makes sense to me." Like,
It's our reference point for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's our reference point's like that's freaking weird, but an alien would be like, "That's smart. That makes sense. You guys fight all the time. You guys go to wars. You guys are racist and violent. That's genius. Keep yourselves away from each other." You know what I mean? Like,
Yes. Self-preservation, right? You don't need anyone else. You have self.
right, right. It's self. That's even if you have, you can socialize even online still, right? Like, you can have relationships fully online eventually, very soon. Like, I mean,
You
not
could have
maybe
your
very
you
soon.
could
You can
have
have
your
them now,
you could have them now. You could have your spiritual needs met
met,
very
yeah,
easily.
without being harmed,
Um,
right? Like, you
mhm.
physically,
Yeah, it really is true. Like again, I think we were talking about Wally the other day.
yeah,
That
ahead of
it,
its
it
time.
was it was funner to watch it because I was, obviously we had this conversation. Um, and it was just interesting to see, like they painted the future as these people just flying, being
And the
swung around this circle. They're just like in a recliner chair with
with the
screens in
thing,
front of them, and they're all essentially just paying to live this luxury life of content at all times. No stress. You're just sitting there being fed. Your body's growing. No exercise. Um,
oof,
and that's sort of, I mean, I joke about this, but like I like to paint this picture for people where imagine the future really is, where VR really takes off. You can put on your glasses and just have any kind of environment you want created for you, as long depending on what you're willing to pay for. And imagine in the future you don't even have like apartments or houses that you live in. You just have like your own bubble. You have an IV drip that's just feeding you nutrients to keep you alive, and you just have glasses building your world. Especially if you're like, and that even sounds good to us, and we're in the US, like a first world
yeah.
country. But imagine you're in a developing nation where it would cost so much more to build out the infrastructure of like better roads,
Oh, just make
better
it, just make it,
sewers, better
yeah.
everything, versus you could pay $16 for every one of your citizens per headset, and you could just create any world you want for them. Like you guys live in luxury starting like that as soon as your credit card clears.
Very, very
Like
Black Mirror. Very true. Yeah.
imagine that's the
Yeah.
world though, right?
It,
Like as go ahead.
no, 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 go. I mean, very, very purposeless. I was just gonna say also very purposeless in the sense of like we're just consuming. We're just hedonistic at that point, and it's almost like what aspect do we lose? Like, will we actually be happy? Have you ever seen the show The Good Place?
Hmm.
Spoiler alert. Did you watch the end?
Yeah, of course.
Where they're just like, oh, we can do whatever now, and like they just live forever doing anything they want, and eventually they're like, I don't know. I guess I'm gonna go now. It's time to like actually. I guess they didn't say die, but like they're like, let's go to the next, like become nothingness or back to the world or back to the earth, because
Yeah.
it was almost like they'd lost meaning to their life. They had lived in heaven. They're like, yeah, I've been doing this for 1,000 years now, like playing every favorite thing I like and eating my favorite food. I think it's time to. It's kind of more philosophical, but like,
It's a good show.
yeah, you're kind of like, is this the heaven you want to build? And like, does taking away the stress take away the meaning or like the pain of life, the
But
good
it's not for
parts?
exactly good parts for the good place.
Yeah.
But it's not for everyone, right? Like there's
Hmm.
still people are still they're inventors, right? They're
Hmm.
creators. They
Yeah, yeah.
want to build new tools. We want to learn how to use new tools. That's just evolution for us. So I think there's, let's say, 20% of society are still going to be builders, doing, to contributing,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
building things that the 80% are just want to, like, I just want to sit back and consume, have no stress in my life. Um,
That's very dystopian though. Now that I'm thinking about it, like imagine like the new poverty is that you're in this heaven, this like VR heaven, personal world where you have everything, and there's the luxury of the 20 or 10% that don't get stuck and are like in the real world. They're like, we're like the ultra rich, so we have the luxury of experiencing real this in real life. Like everything you experience in VR, we just make money off of all you guys plugged in. We have like pools and mansions and food, and we just experience it with no disease in real life. Like that's a dystopian. Like I can see that happening. It's like let's content, let's basically content enslave the majority of people, and we'll be like the few 10% of this. We'll have real life. We're powerful enough to do it. Let's just enjoy it.
I mean, it is an interesting question of, like, if you can create, if you can draw your own purpose, what would it be in life? What would you do? I think for a lot of people, it's just like like the typical question everyone gets asked, like, oh, if you won $1 million tomorrow, what would you do? Most people would be like, I'd quit my job,
Right,
right?
right,
Because that
right.
is such a hassle, that's such a pain point for people. They're like, I want to quit my job. Okay, and do what? You'll spend time with your family. You'll go on vacation. You'll relax, right? You're sort of just calming your anything that hurts you, right? It's like an
Yeah.
Advil for life. But then what do you do? Do you keep just consuming content? Does it become much more about your family? Is it like, do you want to create? Do you want to have a hobby? Do you want to experience new things? What, like, as people, as like what do our souls crave? It's
Right.
kind of like the deep question about
That's
it.
a deep question, and it's probably yeah. I can't answer that question because everybody probably has something different. But there's probably some human connection aspect to it, right? There's something about like people pick things up because they're inspired by other people, like hobbies and things like that. They're inspired by other people, and I think people crave to connect to other people through those things, like almost like the tribal mentality that you mentioned earlier, but like rather than some physical origin, it's just like a similar mindset. Like, oh, we both like to read books, so we're part of that book tribe mentality. Like, we know more, than those who don't read. Those who don't
Hmm.
read don't really have the vocabulary that we use. It's just like I think we all still. I think something instinctual in us. We crave that tribal like I heard something once before. I'm sorry, I'm digressing here, but like I heard something that kind of stuck with me, and I was just like, as much as I didn't want to believe it, I think it's true.
Tell me.
The closest, if you want to bring people together, the best way to bring people together is to align on something you all hate. You know what I mean? Like, unfortunately, like hate is one of those things that can really bring people together. Unfortunately, well, unfortunately, it depends on the context, right? Like, it could be a good. I hate to say a good hate, but it could be like if aliens came and just and like blew up most of attacked most of the places on Earth, we'd all come together because we're
We
like,
channel against
yeah,
aliens.
we all hate
Yeah.
these guys. Like, let's get together. At work, colleagues, I freaking hate my fucking boss. Sorry, I cursed, but upper management, right? I hate upper management. They get together and it really brings people to like. It's just a way to bring people together. Anger, right?
Clear, you don't
Huh?
hate them. You don't hate upper management, just people.
Yeah, just clearly, exactly. But like, just people come together in those scenarios, right? Like we've all been in a work environment where that's the case, right? Where somebody's like, I don't like upper management. Oh yeah, me neither.
Right.
Or
Misery loves company, right?
yeah,
That's the famous saying.
or like, but it could also be political, right? Like people are just that politician. He's doing terrible things. Like, let's all come together. And it just brings people together.
So this brings me to an interesting comment I'll make on that. I really like that quote that you said, or statement. But the flip side of hate is love,
Love, yep.
right? And if you think about the political example that you just gave, yeah, you could say that people hate, let's say, President X, and they want President Y, but they want President Y because they love President Y, right? And so they hate what's happening to the people that they love,
Mm-hmm.
right? The way like their friends and family are going to be impacted if President X stays in power.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if President Y gets elected, then my love for that president, for what he can do for my family and the people that I and the values that I carry. That's love, right? And so I think people forget that. They're like, oh, I hate them, but they hate you too. But more importantly, they love what
The
you're
other.
the other thing. So it's two-sided coin on there.
Yeah, it is. It
Uh,
is. It is.
I don't. I'm trying to think, while we're talking about this, I'm trying to think, how do we summarize this episode?
Oh yeah, yeah, no, 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 yeah, yeah. We're going all over the place. We're going all over the
It's interesting.
place.
It's interesting though, but
Well, if I could bring him back then really quickly though, I
or-
will say I wonder that. So obviously, I'll summarize at least some of the consequences of the population decline, just to those who are listening. Right, it can be complex, and in some cases, if you see global, what ultimately it would lead to is economic stagnation because there's fewer workers, fewer output, fewer services, fewer people to consume and purchase those things. Shortage of skilled workers, social problems because people aren't engaging with each other as much. An aging population, of course, puts strain on social security and healthcare systems because who's paying for that if you don't have? That's what China's about to go through, by the way, and Italy as well. And I think UK might go through this, but definitely Italy is like the prime Western Europe one. They have a brain drain. However, the opposite side of the coin, I would say, is that like population decline, in some cases, is not always a negative thing in the sense that it can lead to environmental benefits, less pressure on resources, higher quality of life for the remaining residents, at least for temporary time, right? Italy's a perfect example of that. Japan's a perfect example of that. Um, Fewer people that are going to compete for jobs and resources, and the old people that live there just live a good life on Social Security, at least until while while they can still afford it. As soon as that runs out, though, that'll be a problem.
but don't the first 2 points that you made um, get stricken if you have technology which raises the output without requiring as many people to work?
Yeah, I guess
So
you're.
it's not really a problem for customers. And then if you have like
Yes.
universal basic income or just additional money because there's more cash flow to distribute, which was kind of my earlier point, then you can give that to people and they can spend more on consumerism, right?
Totally,
So that machine keeps churning.
totally right. It's automated. I agree. So the output starts to stay the same, at least for the products and goods and services that have been established that can run on AI, right, or like
I mean,
automation.
yeah, but output has to. It can't just stay the same. It has to continue increasing because, like, if you look at any company that's public in the stock market, every quarter needs to be better than
Better,
the last,
yeah.
right? And
It's
so,
just a
okay,
problem
now
with our yeah.
everyone's excited about like how do we leverage AI so that you can get rid of some of these manual workers and replace them with a machine that can do it 100, 10, 100, 1,000 times faster and cheaper
Yeah.
and safer, right? So you don't get lawsuits, you don't have injuries, right? So like actually think in a way, society is going, it's evolving into where it's always going to go, which is every generation should be feeling like it's working less and less, right?
Agreed.
We had that with the industrial revolution, we're having it with this AI revolution, and so ultimately, yes, people are going to lose their jobs, like in the immediate term, of course. Output from companies, I predict, is going to go up. But then that money is going to actually go to the money of, I think, more people. In a way, it's going to get redistributed.
How
Um, there's
UBI?
nuance.
Don't we
There's
need to,
nuances there,
yeah?
but
Don't we need
but
the
but
UBI idea to kick in here?
and I think it will, right? Because if you have so many people who are being displaced, put out of work because of AI, you have to pay them universal basic income. Otherwise, they're just not getting any of that money at all. And then you have a unbelievable homeless population, which no city would allow, other than San Francisco.
Though we're seeing yeah. Well, I don't know. I feel like we're seeing like a version of that right now.
In a way, yeah. I,
Like
I
at
think
least the
these are
baby
like I think these are
beginnings.
these are shocks. I think these are shocks that we're seeing throughout the system.
Yeah. A lot of
But
homeless
these,
people everywhere. Like not just the blue. Like as much as people like to say, like oh, it's blue cities. Like red cities have homeless populations and very bad home crisis in all cities across, not even just the U.S. across the world. And I think it's
Yeah.
the housing cost everywhere is just crazy
Hmm.
ridiculous.
And it's continuing to rise too. I also think that once inflation, let's say it gets down to the 2% that everyone's that the Fed is targeting, um, will landlords decrease the rent back to pre-inflation times? I don't think so. I think there's going to be a lot of shops and like merchants who won't reduce the rates simply because the cost of doing business was high at the time. But now it's levelized. It's leveled, right? Um,
How
I
does
actually
demand?
think, yeah, and so like can't are they going to do? Are merchants going to do the right thing? Is kind of the question. That's
Right, because they
I don't
can't.
know.
Yeah,
I'm a skeptic when it comes to that.
I agree. I agree. And actually, I know this is like more on inflation now, but I think it's becoming more clear that the high prices now are more of a price gouge versus just inflation. It's just hard because everybody's kind of like you riding on the wave of inflation, the corporations or like the merchants, and they're like, well, let's just keep it high, right? People will still buy
Is
it.
anyone complaining? Right? Exactly.
I think people
It's
are
that kind of like
complaining,
I
but
don't know
they'll
what's
pay
going to
it.
happen.
Yeah, like I don't
Yeah.
want to be the first to lower my prices. But now that I say it out loud, I think there could be, there are times in the economy when people start to like lowball each other, right? In a capitalist economy, it's like, oh, price of electronics, cool. If for example, if I'm Sony and I'm selling, let's say I'm a private company that sells this e-reader, right? If Amazon's selling it, if I'm price gouging today, right, at $5, keep it simple, at $5, and it costs me $1 to make this, and I'm competing with an Amazon or a big company that sells it for 6 or 7. Oh, I've got room. I'd rather get more sales. I'll cut it down to $3, and then maybe Amazon will be like, no, I'll cut it to 250. So there could be situations where we have that reverse race to the lower price. We've seen it with electronics before. We've seen it maybe with maybe with rental properties. It might get that way because there could be another city. Like it could start somewhere. It could start in a new city where somebody says, "I'm out of this city. Look at the rents in that great city right now. It's $1,000 a month. I'm not paying 3K for or 4K for that city." People start to move to that city. People in other cities start to see demand go down. Of course, a place like where we live, New York, this might not be the case because it never goes away. The demand never goes away. But I feel like they may start, like if we do see that population decrease, there might be a race to get people back in by lowering the price of rent. I actually was thinking, and I saw this during COVID. I think I forget who was trying to do this. I actually think that it would be a good idea that if, and this will be controversial for libertarians,
Oh, let's hear it.
I think I think government should fine commercial real estate or rental properties that leave it vacant for an X amount of time, a reasonable amount of time. Commercial real estate a little tighter, like real like for example, commercial real estate you can't be vacant for more than 4 months, 4 3. Let's say, yeah, let's make it 4 months. Reason being, you start to destroy our downtowns, our commercial centers. You start to suck the lifeblood out of our cities because now you have an empty shop, an empty storefront, looks abandoned, destroys the quality of life, no access to goods and services. You better rent that out at a lower cost. What are you asking for? You're asking for 3,000? No, no, no. Doesn't matter. Take a hit. You better get this rented out for 2K, and it better be. You know what I mean? Like that way, people are incentivized to open businesses. Prices drop, and then also for rental properties for like where people live, real estate properties. I'd say give it like 8 months, right? Like maybe it's double that, 8 months. If you don't have a tenant there, lower your prices. You need to lower your prices to drive people in. I think that would be a guardrail that I would at least test or consider, because vacant apartments, nobody wins vacant apartments in commercial vacant real estate. Like everybody loses. Everybody loses, except
Well,
maybe
not
the owner.
right. The owner doesn't really lose, right? Because they get to write off not only the depreciation of the property, but the vacancy. That's money in their pocket.
Wait,
Um,
how? Oh, because they're writing it off.
I think that you could just write
That
off
is
the loss.
terrible. That is so counterintuitive.
Yeah, but whether that's true or not true, I think it is. But let's say it is true. Knowing that would my timer is going off.
Yeah, yeah, it's
I didn't
34
realize
minutes.
I didn't realize it was going to be so loud in the in my ear. So let's argue that that is true. Knowing that, how would you still push? Would you still go into business as a landlord? That's one, right? Which is like a lot of taxable revenue for the city. If they don't, that's a big loss. Um, but also, I just think the city that would be overstepping, right? I think a lot of people would push back against that kind of legislation, and it just wouldn't pass. I would
Yeah.
actually argue that if then those landlords sell off their properties at a fire sale and they get out of the city, that is disastrous to the city's taxable income.
Yeah.
Is it more disastrous than, whatever revenue the business earns if it is an occupied storefront? That's kind
Yeah.
of the question then.
I
What's the
think
better?
yeah, my perspective would be that I think it's like don't like it depends on the city. I think like a place like New York, I don't think every city should have that. I think a city like New York should have that because New York has a brand name. It's a class A city, class S, like London, like Paris. LA, I think should have that. Class C. These are world brands. Like if you're not gonna play the game, if you're gonna come here, like play the game, rent it out. Like you don't. This is not Montana. Whatever. Like the Bismarck, I think that's not the biggest city in Montana. This isn't like Bumble anywhere, Wyoming. You know what I mean? Like this is. You like my effort? This isn't like you come here to start business and motivate. Like you want to play in New York, you play by rules. This is a city of 8 million people. 8 million people need some level of organization. This isn't the wild wild west. Are you going to open up a business? Cool. You don't want to? Well, we need money from you. That's it. We need money from you. And if you don't, go ahead and sell it off. Because you know what? There's 8 million people in this city somebody will buy your space and they will open up a business and they're willing to take less. Because the next person who's the middle class person who never had a business open, and if the prices drop, they'll be like, whoa, this is like a gold mine to me. I'll rent it out for like $2,900 a month. I'll do
You're
less
shifting
than
up. You're shifting
you're shifting
opportunity
up.
to
Yes, there
other
you go.
people.
Perfect. Yeah, you articulated it perfect. You're shifting it because the next person will be like, dude, I'll take that, and yeah, I'll rent it for $100 less. I've never had a storefront before.
New entrants in the game.
New entrants in the game. So that's what I mean. But I do agree that like places like Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, and I'm not making fun of them. I'm just saying those are places where I think the uh, more libertarian format works, makes sense. Less population. It's out in the West. It's more sparsely populated. People can kind of govern themselves a little bit more. It's not an 8 million. It's not LA. It's not New York. It's not Chicago. Where we're talking about a city or Miami, city of millions of people, where you can't have 8 million people and have the concept of the wild wild west. This just isn't like psychologically that doesn't even make sense. 8 million people can't live together with no law and pick themselves up by the bootstrap. They would destroy themselves. It's almost like a miracle that NYC and London and like LA and Chicago are functioning cities with different people from different backgrounds and different religions that are at war across the ocean. You need some level of regulation in a way to make you have to make it work for everybody. You have to build rules that'll give back and stimulate.
And you're saying that by allowing these storefronts to remain vacant, these landlords, the commercial landlords, are harming the city and its
Yeah,
citizens.
100%. Yeah. That's exactly what I think it is. It's like you're in a city of 8 million people. You cannot have this individualistic mindset 100%. Like you can't be you can't if you're gonna live amongst 8 million people, you probably don't even live actually among. I bet you don't live amongst the 8 million people. But if you are participating in the economy of 8 million people, you need to give back some love to some level. You have to give back, even if you're like a selfish person. At least 30 to 40% of your intent is to make it positive. There has to be a higher level of intent, not like, yeah, I'm gonna move to Florida and just own an empty storefront in Manhattan That to me is like ridiculous. It's like that's literally like putting the middle finger to the city, and I think the city should give the middle finger back to that person as a collective. It's like, cool, we'll screw you then, you know?
You seem very passionate about this topic. Can I ask why? Why is
Yeah,
it so important to you?
because it just doesn't. I see it and it doesn't make sense. It's like such a. It's such a not an easy fix, but it's such a. It's like how is that even allowed? To me, it feels ridiculous. Again, like the hate thing, like that's. I feel passionate because it's like to me, it's like that shouldn't be allowed. Like if you're gonna make price of homes for everybody expensive, and you're gonna make starting a business expensive for everybody, like you're harming people in so many ways. A, you're making it hard for them to have a home, but two, you're making it even harder for them to start a business and be entrepreneur, an entrepreneur where they can risk and try new things, because you've decided to just hold on to this empty lot, and you destroy the quality of life for people as they walk around and they just see empty storefronts, probably tagged up with graffiti, because you decided that you don't care about anybody else. And if you don't care about anybody else, then nobody should care about you. That's kind of my take. It's like you get what you give, and I feel like they're giving, to me, they're giving the middle finger, so they need to get the middle finger back. That's kind of how it feels. As a collective, they need a collective middle finger back, or at least give us something. Give the city money.
There's somewhere in the last thing that you just said. There's a good slogan for your next congressional race. But I fully agree, man. And also, I mean, to your point about, it's a locked storefront. It has graffiti. Once you have graffiti, probably gonna have more crime.
Yeah.
Someone's gonna throw a rock when they're drunk at this tagged up store,
Oh, it's empty.
and it
Nobody
kind of
cares.
just goes on
Boom.
from there. Which I guess in a way also hurts, the prospects for the landlord to be able to even open something up if they wanted to.
Right.
But what does it do to the people in that neighborhood, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think like the landlord should see it as like, if I'm going to buy real estate in New York, this class A city, then I'm playing a heavy game here. I can make millions of dollars. I can have a successful business. If they're doing great, I can up their rent. Hey, how much money you guys went from making 1 million to 10 million in revenue in a year? If you don't mind, I'd love to. I not love to, but I'm going to raise your rent, because we're all winning here, right? I want to keep you here, but I think it's fair that I can, just 4K to 5K. Like those are opportunities for you to grow as a landlord. Hey, have a partnership. I would love to keep you going. I know your revenue has increased. I figured that if I increase your rent by $1,000 this month, this year, or 2,000, that's only like a dent, 0.5% in your profit. And you're a great tenant. I'd love to keep you.
I assume if I ask you if I ask you about your your thoughts on I'm forgetting the name of that company that Jeff Bezos is also backing, but all of these big corporations that are getting into the game of gobbling up single family and multifamily houses.
That makes me want to vomit, personally.
I think we can wrap the episode there.
Yeah.
Save it for another time. But
Save
it
it
is
for
what
another
a
time.
fascinating topic, man.
Yeah, yeah. That one.
And how that's going to impact, because a point that you made in a previous episode, which was not only the inavailability,
Yeah,
inavailability. Which one is right?
Yeah.
Inavailability of single family homes, but also to your point about the ownership perspective, right? Is anybody going to own family houses anymore, or is it just going to be
Yeah.
completely out of reach because they're being gobbled up, and now you just have to rent a house? That's the best that you can do. Who knows? Maybe renting houses will become more popular. We used to know someone growing up whose house was rented,
Mhm.
and you couldn't tell the difference. They were paying for like just the rent, which was
Yeah.
essentially the mortgage, same exact thing. It's all their furniture. Why are we only limited to
Well,
living
I've
in buildings
purchased-
instead of houses?
Yeah, I've considered it actually once, like in the last year, just to see what it was like, if I would even like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. But to your point, yeah. Like, hey, it's like, what environment? Like, what would it be like? Because buying a house is a big commitment, It's like maybe rent one so you can see if you even like that. You may not like
Maybe
that.
rent to own. Oh, that's an interesting
Rent to own
prediction.
is
I wonder
cool.
if rent to own could become more popular and you're basically buying
Isn't
it
that?
out maybe from these
I almost feel like
corporations.
that's kind of like a mortgage, like a non-guaguaranteed mortgage, right?
I
It's
just
all.
missed her. I just missed her Miyagi, this gnat that was flying around the room, and I and I grabbed it.
Who
What were you
else?
saying about the mortgage?
Oh, I was gonna say it's kind of like I was gonna say it's like a non-committed mortgage, in a sense of like with a mortgage you've committed to buying the house. You kind of don't. The bank kind of owns the house, right? Until you pay it all off. As much as we want to feel like we own that house, um, with the rent to buy, it's like you can just keep like you can come pull out at the end. Like actually, I don't want to do this. Like I don't want to own this house.
But with rent to buy, I
Rent
would
to buy.
the
Sorry,
way
rent
I
to buy.
the way I would structure it is I would charge more for the rent because you're trying to pay like actually the mortgage and the interest on the mortgage, and on and yeah, and so otherwise I think everyone would just be taking advantage of it, saying yeah I want to live in this house and I'm renting, and I'd still be throwing away that money whether I was renting in a building or renting this house from you. But instead of paying me 4,000 a month, if you're paying 5,000 a month, then you're on the path to
To owning it.
owning the home. Versus if it's only 4,000 and it's like okay, you're renting, but you're not building any equity at all, and then
Until
it's
you
like
buy, until you reach your goal, right? Like yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
or just buy it out all at once. Well, this was an interesting episode.
Yeah,
I'd
quite
be
long.
curious to think what not even the length, but like what is the like if you fed this transcript to Chat GPT, what's the title that it would summarize it as?
Yeah,
I'm super curious, but a good one.
yeah. All right, guys,
Wrap it here.
wrap it here.
All
Later.
right.